Hey, what's up everybody on YouTube? This is part 2 to my Protection Paladin guide for Classic WoW. First off, I want to thank anybody who watched my first guide and commented on it. I got a lot more positive feedback on that than I thought I would, so I really appreciate anybody who sat through that and is here for part 2. I'm going to talk about some more stuff that I wanted to mention in that last video and new things that I learned over the past couple weeks. So let's get started. First off, I want to give a shout out to Caperfin. He does shaman tanking guide videos along with a whole bunch of other videos that talk about things that you wouldn't normally hear in the game, and I definitely recommend watching his channel. I'm going to put a link to it in the description. Next, I want to talk about pulling mobs as a protection paladin. In my last video I said that exorcism would be one of your only ways of pulling mobs and they'd have to be undead. Most people think this, but it's actually not true, and I didn't know about a couple of these items, which is the magic candles. You hurl a fireball at the enemy from about 30 or 40 yards away. I'm not exactly sure if it's 30 or 40, but it's a good range away, and you can pull mobs with this. You can farm them right at the start of the game, and the same with the magic dust, but it puts people to sleep from far away. I had heard about the magic dust but didn't realize the range you could use it from, so you can use this for pulling mobs and CCing them if you don't have any extra CC in your group when you're running dungeons. And then Caperfin also mentioned the electromagnetic gigaflux reactor from Gnomegan, and you can use this to hurl a lightning bolt at the target, and you can switch this before the lightning bolt hits a boss. You can switch to your other helm, so you don't have to use this during battle. You just use it to pull the boss, and that extra lightning bolt is going to give you extra threat right off at the start, which is nice because usually paladins didn't have a way to do this. They had to just run in, and all three of these items are very useful for pulling things from far away. Next up, I want to talk about the Annihilator Axe and the Nightfall Axe. You should always have these in your bags as an off tank. It's good to keep them so you can switch and put these debuffs on the boss to help contribute to the raid. Whenever the main tank is tanking the boss, you can just use these, and any off tank paladin or warrior should always bring these. And we'll see if the Annihilator Axe debuff stacks with other armor reducing effects in Classic. I think it does, but we'll have to find out. Next up, I want to talk about potions. Caperfin has a video where he talks about how the rejuvenation potion pulls the most threat out of all of the potions. This is really nice to know as a protection paladin because you benefit from the health and the mana, and the fact that it's pulling the most threat is just a nice thing to know. So I'll be using a lot more of these as a paladin when I tank. Next up is the limited invulnerability potion. This makes you invincible for 6 seconds, but it also drops your threat completely. So if a warrior had, say you had to pull the boss off of a warrior, and he had threat and you were second on threat, if he takes this, he will drop threat and it will go to who is on the second on the threat table, which would be you. So it's kind of a reverse pseudo taunt in a way. This takes practice and you gotta work together to do this, but it's just a way to get around the taunt swaps in a way, and I just like talking about how you can use it for this. Next up, I'm going to talk about talent trees and how you can spec for raiding. I wanted to mention this first because this spec is really good for being a healer and tank, and if you're off tank as a protection paladin, this is just really nice how you can switch back and forth and heal if needed, because you get illumination in the holy tree, and getting illumination pretty much makes you a holy paladin. So it's their most useful thing in their tree is illumination. So once you have that, you're still able to get holy shield at the end of protection tree, and you can tank mobs fine. You could even tank bosses, no problem with this, but the next spec I'm going to show you is better for tanking bosses. This is the talent tree that Killer Dookie recommended, and I can see why. For single target threat, it's probably the best way to go. If if you're an off tank paladin and you have your guild has molten core on farm or something, and you just want to try and actually tank a boss and just show your guild that you can do it, this would be your best bet for holding threat on a single target mob. But the last tree that I showed you would be what you would be running most of the time. That way you can switch and heal when needed and still be a lot more utility to the raid. But as a main tank protection paladin, this is the type of thing you would be looking for mainly. Now I want to talk a little bit of theory crafting, stuff I've been looking at on how to build threat when the target is not looking at you. Say you're on Hakar or another boss where you really need to stay second and first on threat the whole time. As a protection paladin, you're gonna build the most threat if the boss is hitting you. You have to have your holy shield up, so you're blocking the attacks and you're gaining more threat that way. But whenever the boss isn't looking at you, you can't do this because you're not blocking their attacks. So I've been looking into ways on how to improve this, and the manual crowd pummeler on spell power Redditans has been doing really good lately, and it's best in slot for feral druids for the whole game. So people are finding a lot more uses for this, and it's cool to look at, combined with this trinket that you get from Blackwing Lair that also increases your swing speed. You pop both of these at the same time. You put counterweight on your manual crowd pummeler with wizard oil or shadow oil, whichever one you can get a hold of. And this is just a good way, I would think, to get your threat up there really high because you're swinging so fast. And I'm going to be testing this more when Classic comes out, and this is just me theory crafting things, but it's just a nice thing to know. And if you're a rep pally, you should also look into stuff like this. Also, real quick, I want to give a shout out to a guy named Varus. He does protection paladin guides also on YouTube, and I just noticed him the other day. And he talks more about spell power gear for pre-raid best in slot and test a lot of weapons and how much threat they pull. Really interesting stuff, so go check out his channel. And he talks more about less defense cap stuff and more spell power, stamina stuff, so it's interesting to learn about, and just try and give him a sub and support his channel. Also, I want to talk about my thoughts on the defense cap and how much defense you should have as a protection paladin. You'll get a lot of different opinions on this, and I really don't think you need the 440 to tank a lot of bosses, if any. In Classic WoW, you can do it without the 440. There are bosses in late game that I could see it definitely helping with. But as a paladin, you have redoubt, which is going to make it so you actually want to get crit to increase your block chance, and increasing your block chance is going to increase your threat. So getting 440 is going to make this completely useless, and there are a lot of situations where you can probably use redoubt to your advantage to hold more threat. So the whole 440 thing, we're still figuring out a lot of stuff when it comes to gear. The community is so small when it comes to protection paladin, and everybody has different opinions about it. And honestly, best in slot is a subjective term when it comes to hybrid classes, especially because we don't know what is best in slot for every boss. We're still figuring this out as we go. The game is as old as it is, but we still don't know these things because so little people play protection paladin in raids. And I can't wait to do more testing on this once the game comes out and everybody can start raiding. So just check out all the videos that I've mentioned, the other protection paladins and other people who tank with hybrid classes, and yeah, that's just what I wanted to mention. Well, I'm going to end the video here, but if you want to throw a subscribe or a like my way, I will be talking more about paladins in the future. And if you have any questions, just comment below, and I'll be leaving links to all the channels I talked about in the description, along with Killer Dookie and Mosin's videos that I mentioned last time on my part 1. But yeah, I really appreciate anybody who stuck along and listened to me, and I'll be making more videos in the future, hopefully. Later.